Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this one. There's quite a few of us from the community today in El Salvador at the Adopting Bitcoin conference. There's a lot of events going on this week. There's a lot of UX challenges and takeaways that we're finding being here on the ground. So looking forward to sharing a lot of that with you guys today. I need to try and
I
retweet
think
this,
I
don't I?
found.
Let's see.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, got you.
Okay, nice.
I think I found the best audio setup that I'm going to get. So I hope that sounds audible to everyone.
Yeah, you
Yeah, you
sound good.
sound good.
Cool.
How do I share like this thing? Let's go like this. Okay, maybe we'll wait one more minute. See who else comes along.
So John, Gunnar, and Stephen, you're all in El Salvador.
Live on the ground.
Awesome.
Yeah.
How's the day so far?
Been going good.
Been going good. It would have been nice if you would have gave us some Spanish lessons before we came, though.
Yeah, like
Well, I've been practicing for 2 months, guys. Come on.
okay.
And I've 2 months, and I haven't heard you say one word of Spanish yet. So now that you said that, next time I see you, I'm going to be expecting a lot.
Oh, well, I didn't know I was supposed to practice my Spanish on you. Do you speak?
No español, no español. No entiendo.
Oh, ¿tú hablas no español?
Yeah. If you
Okay.
if you come here, I think it's definitely a good idea to do a couple months of Spanish. I did a few classes back in high school, and I'm like praying that I'm wishing that I paid a little bit more attention.
Sure.
I'm sure, though, with a little bit of time there, it'll get easier.
Okay, maybe we can. Maybe. Sorry, John. Go ahead.
No, nothing.
Yeah, no, I was going to say maybe we can kick off. There's quite a few people in here already. I'm not really sure where to start with this, but yeah. So like I said earlier, for a couple of new people that have joined, there are a number of us currently in El Salvador, attending, some speaking, some on panels at Adopting Bitcoin. There are like two tracks at the Adopting Bitcoin conference. There's a more dev focused track, so more technical talks, and then there's also the economics track as well. And yeah, so far the event's been super well organized. It's for me personally, it's been nice to, after kind of a year, 18 months, to meet some of the people that I've built relationships with over this kind of a period of not being able to travel. So that's been really nice as well, and to just have that kind of the buzz and the energy around Bitcoin is just kind of really nice to see in person. So yeah, well, maybe myself, John, and Stephen speak a little bit about our experience as it relates to trying to use Bitcoin and Lightning here. I can maybe kick things off a little bit. When I arrived at the airport, I found a taxi driver who was, he was pretty. He seemed like he'd been pretty much orange pilled when it came to Bitcoin. So after he dropped me off, I offered to pay him in Bitcoin. I asked him if he was using the Chivo wallet, and he said like no, he's using Moon, and he was like Moon, like non custodio, decentralization. I was like, oh yeah, this guy knows. And yeah, it was all pretty smooth. He like just generated an invoice for me. I think it was $10 or $15. I can't remember now, and just paid, and it all was very smooth. I think the next kind of experience for me was just asking about what people thought about Bitcoin. I asked some of the hotel staff here, what do they think about Bitcoin, and the response was very kind of anxious, quite tense, didn't really understand it. There was this kind of, yeah, I mean, it has been, dropped on the people quite rapidly here, I guess. And so she said that there needs to be a lot more education around it, and just generally speaking, um, at least from her perspective and the hotel in general, I didn't really understand what was going on. And then also went to like the local mall here yesterday to try and pay for lunch. And a lot of the like restaurants here just didn't want to go do the process of accepting Bitcoin. I think a lot of it was to do with the fact that on the accounting side, like they don't have a lot of their point of sale systems like set up for tracking and accounting for being paid in Bitcoin. So I think there's just like a bit of a technical gap there. But I personally need to do a bit more, just like lightning payments, and just go through some of the friction around it. But I've seen a lot of stuff like that, what Steven's been posting, and I think Ref and Breeze has posted some stuff, and there's a whole host of people experimenting and different with different success rates, definitely. So I guess we'll hear more of that as we talk today, and maybe we can share some of the Twitter threads that have been flying around as well. Steven, you've been trying your best to like blog every day since you've been here. I've been reading your blog quite intensely. It's been super insightful. So do you want to share some of your thoughts so far?
Yeah, sure. A summary of my entire experience is just that it's complicated. Um, while I certainly love the kind of positive, images of, people posting their receipts online for, what they're purchasing, um, that doesn't really, portray the complexity that's happening on the ground. And I mean, I think there's a number of ways to kind of talk about the issue. I mean, I've been documenting a lot of stuff just from a technical and design perspective about, what I'm seeing from various wallets and services and vendors, but there's also just kind of the human side of the situation, and I might just touch on that very briefly, because you mentioned speaking to some hotel staff and them feeling nervous about that. And I was speaking with some people who've been living here their whole lives, and one interesting story they told me was about the dollarization that happened about 20 years ago now, where essentially the previous currency was the cologne, and then the government said, no, we're going to have another currency. It's going to be the dollar, and we're going to you're going to be able to use both currencies. They're both legal tenders, so you're both legally required to accept them. And just the stories around that, this kind of brings back bad memories for some people of that time, as I understand it, because that was a very stressful time for many people, having to convert between the cologne and the dollar. Inadvertently caused a little bit of price inflation on the USD side, because people were essentially just rounding numbers, because that's what was the easiest thing to do. And then just furthermore, there was this saying of like, well, we're going to support both currencies moving forward, but that didn't end up happening. It ended up just switching to the dollar, and so there's this kind of like that there's this sense of like, well, what if the same thing happened with Bitcoin? And that's a stressful thing for some people, because like where we are in San Salvador, from what I can see, it's actually, there's a lot of people with smartphones. The internet speed is very good, but there's some places in the country where people don't have as good smartphone access or as good internet access. And so this idea of this like possible fear of, what if we, the rest of the country switch to this digitally native currency without us, is kind of a fear. So that doesn't really have to necessarily to do with Bitcoin or design, but I thought it was important to note the kind of the cultural context of where we are here. And I have several more things that I could talk about, but maybe this would be a good time to hand it over to Johns for a little bit to get some of his experiences.
Hey, yeah. I haven't done that many payments here in El Salvador. There's a couple like reasons behind that. One of them, it's kind of difficult for me to like purchase Bitcoin to begin with, right? When I landed, it was like about a week before everyone else started coming in. Um, got in the taxi drive. Got in the taxi. It's paid in cash. That was fine. And I think the first lunch, no, first coffee at Starbucks, I had the next day. The payment went out pretty smooth. They're using this wallet called IBEX, and it's from this exchange, right? And typically with these transactions, it's pretty seamless. But a few days later, tried to make some payments in at night at a Bitcoin meetup, and we had a lot of QR code problems. Scanning like first. It was the first night that this meetup actually was this venue was actually accepting Bitcoin, so it was all like very new for them, and it really felt it was a bit frustrating, and like seeing like the struggle that people were going like this waiter was going through to get this QR code signed. I'm sorry. Get the QR code scanned and get the payment. I think he stood up there for about like almost 10 minutes, and it just made me like start reflecting on like the kind of like design patterns and stuff that we've like established in the space. Some other places that you go to, which are using the Chivo wallet, the Lightning option is really kind of hidden. So the Chivo supports USD, Bitcoin on chain, and Lightning, and like within that like within the Chivo ecosystem, like things are pretty um, smooth from what I've heard. But if you're trying to pay out of Chivo, or if you're trying to pay into Chivo, there's some stuff on the application layer that isn't really resolved, like transactions not getting updated. Like the list of transactions not getting updated from the Chivo API server, the Chivo servers, and what that creates is a friction when you're trying to do a payment, and like that like let's say the Lightning payment went through, but the merchant or whoever is like looking at the whoever's receiving, they don't know that, and they don't also know how to verify that. Like if you show them a pre-image, they don't know how to verify this at all, right? And there's no options to do this inside of the wallets now, right? We don't have any kind of like patterns around that. And yeah, so like overall, it's you know as Steven said, we have a lot of work to do. The other thing that I noticed is like some Bitcoiners coming here, like kind of disappointed with the amount of places that are accepting Bitcoin. But I think it's really important for us to, be humble and remember that there's no other place in the world that you could probably spend this much Bitcoin in. Um, at merchants in this kind of like payment situation.
I'd like to speak a little bit more about Chivo and dig into that topic a little bit deeper. I'd say that and from a technical and design perspective, Chivo is probably the single most complicated factor in all of this. And so I want to go ahead and say up front that all of this criticism of it, I mean entirely constructively. Um, so essentially you could think of Bitcoin as two things. You could think of it being as an asset, and you can also think of it as being a payment network. And I think Chivo kind of trends more towards viewing it as like an international payment network. So when you spin up you open the app for the first time, the default screen is to send and receive dollars. and that is an entirely proprietary thing. Like you see the QR code and the number beneath it, it's like a 6 or 8 digit number. So that's something proprietary for their system. And so that's something probably incredibly valuable for, maybe a Salvadoran in the US trying to, send dollars back home or something, or just people around town who want to pay each other in dollars but digitally. So that's valuable, but it's more comparable to something like PayPal, right? It's not Bitcoin. So that's the default. And part of the confusion comes from a lot of the messaging. Like you see a store that has a sign that says, Bitcoin accepted here, but it'll also have the Chivo logo. And so for some people, Chivo and Bitcoin are kind of like synonymous ideas. Not for everybody, but I think for some people. So then once you get past the fact that, like, okay, I'm a foreigner, I have a Bitcoin wallet, not a Chivo wallet. So, you ask for no Chivo Bitcoin, por favor. So there's a little button, you toggle it to Bitcoin, and then it gives you an on-chain address, typical Bitcoin QR code with an on-chain address. Now, this was an interesting design decision, I thought, because, my thinking was that for daily spending, Lightning would be the default. And especially because Chivo is a custodial wallet, and most of this the back end, like Bitcoin addresses and Lightning payment stuff, is handled on Chivo servers or something to that effect. This isn't something the user has to worry about because of the custodial nature of it. But for whatever reason, Bitcoin is the default, and so I have had experiences where I've taken other Bitcoin wallets and I've sent on-chain payments, and the payment will show up, on my end as having gone through, really just having entered the mempool, to be technical about it. But, the cashier will have to manually swipe down and refresh their Chivo screen to see that the transaction has been received. And I had a cashier once guide me towards sending the payment twice, to see what happened. And, then I basically just paid them twice. So you run into kind of hiccups like that because the app doesn't, I guess it doesn't get push notifications, or, the app isn't checking back to the home server enough. But you get complicated, awkward situations like that. And if you want to do Lightning, you have to instruct the user to go to this drop-down menu. They first have to switch to Bitcoin on-chain. Then they have to go to a drop-down menu, select Otras Billeteras, other wallets, and then select receive via Lightning, and then they get a Lightning QR code. And I had a similar situation where I was paying a food vendor, a guy pushing a food cart around on the street, and I was trying to send him some very small Lightning payments, and the payments showed up successful on my wallet, which is interesting because that's Lightning. This isn't on-chain. Just on-chain is a little bit like up for debate about what a transaction, whether a transaction is good or not. Do you want to say when it hits the mempool? Do you want to say when it's one conf? Do you want to say six comps? The Lightning payments are atomic. They either succeed or they fail. So when my Breeze wallet sends a payment and it shows up completed on my end, I know that a Lightning node has received my payment. And when the person holding the Chivo wallet does not see the payment being received, that's a little bit scary because for me, it's like, it was a small, trivial amount of money to me, but I was just kind of like, I don't really know who to contact or who to call to try and figure out where this payment went. And I'm not sure if the guy pushing the food cart knows who to call. And eventually I saw him later that night and he said, oh, yeah, I got it. So he did receive the payments eventually. They were delayed by about an hour. But these kinds of, user experience issues are the kind of thing that I fear makes Bitcoin look unreliable to people. Meanwhile, on the other side of that, like Ibex Mercado, is a company that's providing merchant services to a lot of companies, and I can go and make a Lightning payment to them very seamlessly. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly what the solution is on the Chivo side, but I guess I personally, just constructively would like to see Lightning be the default. I think that would help people out more, and I just think that there needs to be some tighter integration with their servers or something to make sure that people are getting updates as soon as they're being paid.
How
Yeah,
did
I'd like to.
sorry, Jess, I was just going to ask, how did the Chivo, will it deal with the, I guess, the pending payment? Did it have much messaging around that? Because
Do you mean the on-chain payment or the Lightning payment?
The Lightning. It's the Lightning payment you said that was delayed, right?
Yeah, there was. Well, both of them. I had both. Well, yeah, I had both of them be delayed. There was
And
no
so,
way
do you
for
know if
them.
it was like, yeah, a network issue, or like did any reasonably decent information surface from the fact that it was still in this
Um,
kind of pending state?
No, there was no information about it. The thing about it is that it doesn't seem, from what I've seen, it doesn't provide the same messaging as like a Lightning, one of the Lightning, open source Lightning wallets that would be like, oh hey, your invoice has expired, you can't use this invoice anymore. I didn't really see any messaging around that, and the network connection seemed perfectly fine to me. Um, again, I don't know exactly how it functions under the hood, but I strongly doubt that he would have been able to actually generate a Lightning invoice had the network connection been bad, because again, because it's not really like a true on the phone Bitcoin wallet. Much of the Bitcoin business logic kind of happens up in the cloud on Chivo's servers, as far as I understand. So I don't really think he would have been able to get the Lightning invoice had he not had good network connection. And he tried switching over to Wi-Fi and back to data and all of that. And I mean, he had good signal, so there was no messaging in the user interface about the payment, being pending. And um, yeah, I'll cut it off there.
Yeah, I wanted to like extend some of the stuff that I was talking about earlier about not being able to like purchase Bitcoin from an exchange and stuff. So a lot of yeah, so I'm in El Salvador now, and I'm like wanting to make these payments in Bitcoin. So I've been doing like a lot of like peer-to-peer transactions with people, like converting like some fiat over PayPal um, to them, or like bank transfers and stuff. So then I can, um, get some Bitcoin. And and okay, so PayPal transaction goes through, and the person who is trying to send me the Lightning payment now, we had like a bunch of failures, right? And the reason I'm bringing this up, right, is because like although we're looking at El Salvador as kind of like like what's happening here, and like maybe some see it as like criticisms towards like these local wallets or whatever, I think the problem is like definitely like ecosystem wide, right? um uh so it's not something that's like only uh, these kind of like UX problems aren't only like persistent in like the Chivo wallet. It's something that we have to like really start looking at as a community, and try to figure out how we're gonna solve Bitcoin UX globally.
Yeah. So,
Johns, what do you think are some of those things that need attention, kind of, or the most attention right now as you're making all of these Lightning or peer-to-peer transactions?
Okay. What are the things that need more attention? I think like down here, I think education. If it's a scope to El Salvador, education. One of the things that some people don't really understand is that like Chivo and the government isn't Bitcoin. It's a completely separate thing. So not like you could be using like other applications. Sometimes it's a surprise to people. There's an organization here that I've been speaking with, Me Premier Bitcoin, and they were doing some really great work to educate like the locals on like non-custodial wallets. So they've been like onboarding people with Moon, and providing kind of like education and stuff around that. The other thing that I kind of like worry about is actually, yeah. I wish if there was more merchants using what do you call it? Like BTC Pay server. Uh, One person said that they saw one restaurant using it, but mostly people are using some like either exchange wallet or whatever. And I think we could really do some work on like setting up this LSP like kind of like ecosystem, so that people can, or even if the exchanges were providing such kind of like LSP services that you connect your BTC Pay server to get like some inbound liquidity and whatnot. um So yeah, I think things are like really scoped towards like custodial things now. I would like to see it like a bit non-custodial, but also things like invoices and addresses, and having some kind of fallback mechanism. Like we're still having Lightning and Bitcoin as separate like as separate toggles. Even though it does make the QR code a little bit more dense, we're still having that separate, even in like popular Bitcoin applications that we're used to, non-custodial Bitcoin applications. So of course, Chivo is gonna like follow the same patterns that other applications in the space are using, right? So we could put that fallback address, that on-chain fallback in the Bolt 11 invoice, or in the BIP21 URI, so that there's just like one single payment request, so that we don't have this kind of like switching between what is Lightning, what is Bitcoin, and yeah, because unless the merchant is trained to understand like the Chivo wallet supports Lightning, and these payments are a lot faster, um, it's not going to make sense to them. They're not going to like open it up. So it should definitely be. I guess like generally like we have to like think about the defaults that we're setting. I guess that's how I would summarize that.
Thank you.
Let me
That was really helpful.
just want to jump in here as well. We have Andrew from Goloy, who might be able to give us a bit of a different perspective on things as well. Andrew, did you want to jump in and say a few things?
Hey, sure. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, we got you. Good.
Cool. Just a quick intro. I joined Galoy less than 2 months ago. At my first Bitcoin job, so newer to the space from an employment perspective. And previously I spent 14 years or so in the digital advertising and strategy and marketing space. So Digitas and Mirum, which is now part of Wunderman Thompson. So really excited to be part of this community. You might have seen me pop up in Slack a little bit. So it's great to be here. Thank you. And I've been impressed by this community for a while now. So it's great to kind of connect and, meet Connor and Johns and some of the folks here. Um, you know, my one of the first things I did joining Galoy was really digging into the lessons learned building the Bitcoin Beach wallet. So, for those of you not familiar, we build Bitcoin banking infrastructure, open source Bitcoin banking infrastructure. Our goal is to let communities and institutions use Bitcoin as money. And the reason why our founder, Nicholas Berthet, came down here in 2020, he learned about the Bitcoin Beach project that was kind of getting off the ground. And he said, well, there's a community that is using Bitcoin as money. And so he came down to work with Mike and Jorge and Chimbera, and built the Bitcoin Beach wallet here in El Salvador, in El Zonte. And I'm sure many of you have listened to some of the Mike Peterson interviews, or maybe interviews with Nicholas Berthet. There was so much learned in building Bitcoin Beach Wallet. And we just published a blog post. I don't know if we can pin it to the thread here. I'll drop it into the Slack. But last week we published it's like a 20-something minute read that tries to recap all of the lessons learned developing down here. I'll just highlight a couple things, and happy to take questions. And please reach out if you do read and have thoughts or questions, because it's hard to capture it all, but it's an amazing story about everything learned. And I'll just read one thing from. So the foreword was written by Mike Peterson, and he said, in retrospect, the outcome was obvious. A population that struggles with poverty and lack of financial inclusion was always destined to see the value of Bitcoin before wealthy communities like Singapore or Silicon Valley. it's just so real, right? Like being down here and seeing some of the struggles. And I think it's hard for us to come down and say, this doesn't feel like it's working. But that's the reason why we are down here, why Nicholas and Hunter, our co-founders, decided to host the conference down here, because there's so much work to do. So I'll top line a few of the lessons that I think are just so important. And, one of which is it's more effective to show people how to use Bitcoin than to tell them about it. Right. So, I think initially sometimes we say Bitcoin is, hard money and inflation proof. And we start talking about all the novel things we've learned about, excuse me, we've learned about Bitcoin and Lightning. But, really what Jorge and Chimbera have been doing is just, hey, let me send you some sats. And you send me some sats, and just getting people like using Bitcoin, right, rather than trying to understand it, because how much do we understand how money works anyway, right? Like this is more of a functional utilitarian use case. Another thing that helped was Bitcoin ATMs. So that was something that I just hadn't thought about, but having Bitcoin ATM in El Zonte really helped people make the mental connection of Bitcoin as money. And so they realized, like, I can exchange these sats and I can get out USD. And so that was something that was interesting. And the last one I'll mention, and kind of kick it around for thoughts or questions, and is the merchant side is so interesting, right? Especially in the context, right? So if somebody is, making pupusas, for instance, down here, one of the things that Mike talks about is, you need to reduce. We all know you need to reduce the friction, right? If you're going to have a human change the way that they currently operate, like it needs to be easier, cheaper, faster than where we are today. And so at the beginning, merchants had to stop what they're doing, wash their hands, go over to this application, find out how to create an invoice, right? And all of the issues we just talked about that can, be a learning curve. And what Nicholas and team did with Bitcoin Beach Wallet was really shift to allow the customer to set the invoice amount. And that was just a massive shift, because when the customer is there and the person in the pupuseria can say, that's 1,000 sats, and that person can type it in on their own. That's when the friction, it's completely frictionless for a merchant. They're actually not even interfacing with the screen. They're just seeing the confirmation come in. And so that was, to me, that was just such a big learning. I'll stop there and see if there's any thoughts, or I can, continue sharing a couple of things that I thought were interesting.
Yeah, thanks for that, Joe. I think we can. Or Stephen, did you want to say something, and then we can open up for wider questions from the wider group if you want.
I was just going to say it was interesting. Well, you mentioned about the ATMs, because I had an experience with a Chivo ATM the other day, and you were talking about showing, not telling people. And one thing that I heard was, or one thing that I noticed while I was there, is that there's a woman whose job was to just basically sit there by the ATM all day, wearing a Chivo shirt. There was like 5 ATMs. Like some of these were like regular banks, but the Chivo ATM had a person that just sat there all day. And if somebody walked up to it and looked like they were confused or having a hard time, she would approach them and help them how to use it. And I was speaking with somebody from another country outside of El Salvador who's just started a Bitcoin ATM business, and he was telling me the exact same thing, that like he had to have somebody sitting there by the ATM. So hearing you say that, like, showing and telling, kind of put that into context, my first thought was like, well, maybe that's probably bad UX if it's so unintuitive that you have to have somebody sitting there helping the user. But maybe that's actually a good thing, that you can have somebody sitting there and they teach you how to use it, and then once and you're kind of feeling confident about it at that point.
Yeah, I think that. It's crazy, right? All of us kind of found our own way to Bitcoin and Lightning, and have spent however many hundreds or thousands of hours working through the process. And I remember some of my first transactions, like that was daunting, right? And I had money that I was able to say, like, all right, if I send this into the atmosphere and it disappears, like I'm going to be okay, right? And like we're here in El Zonte and El Salvador, we're designing for communities that are historically unbanked. And so changing the money that they use is just, I think, I've been learning to like keep that such in perspective, and the gravity of doing that. One quote from the article I'll just add, just because I loved it, is directly from Mike, and he says, there's little kids in El Zonte who make more Lightning transactions than most OG Bitcoiners, right? And it's like despite the all of the work ahead of us to remove friction and make things more interoperable. It's like the future, right? there's little kids that are buying their lunch using Lightning. And then one other thing I'll mention, just because I think it's one of the more important parts of this conversation, is the idea of custody. So one of the things that we put in the article is sort of this spectrum of custody between like all the way from like unable to withdraw, right? So you have PayPal, which you actually can't even withdraw Bitcoin from, and then on the other side, and you have complete self custody and multi-signature solution. The Bitcoin Beach wallet, just for everybody, is it is a shared what we call community custody solution. So it's a different option, and the reason why that is self custody is not an appropriate, at this point in time, way to onboard a community of people like El Zonte, or perhaps many different, perhaps any community at the very beginning, right? Like we talked about, you have to use it, right? You show people how to use it. And if you jump right to like, seed phrases and everything else, that's a bridge too far. And so with the Bitcoin Beach wallet, we call it a wallet, but it essentially, it is it's a community Bitcoin bank, where it has keys are held by the community, by people in the community, and the potential for a solution like that is unbelievable. Like imagine like bringing a community bank model back to local communities, where like you can invest in local community projects, you can have pooled resources and investments locally. And, of course, we want everybody to learn how to self-custody, especially as they build up, some portion of wealth in Bitcoin. But the Bitcoin Beach wallet has kind of built up and onboarded the community in El Zonte by being that shared custody model.
Are you guys doing anything in terms of like education, like with the Bitcoin Beach wallet? And how does that look?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I mean, the entire success of Bitcoin Beach and everything that has followed is built on education and is built on the Bitcoin Beach team. So Jorge, Chimbera, there's 10 or 12 other people that are community organizers who are in person, one-on-one, day after day, showing people and helping and troubleshooting. And it's been that way. It has been a very, one of the things that we put in the guide is the idea, growth happens gradually, then suddenly, right? We all know this, but, the idea that it's going to take as much effort onboarding the first 50 people as the next 1,000, right? And so it's a lot of hard work that happened between 2019 and 2020, and leading up to when a lot of people learned about El Zonte and Bitcoin Beach was after a ton of work had already been done. And so that's kind of what this guide does, is walked through that story. But the education component has been, like, I would say, central, and as if not more important than the technology solution.
What's interesting with this, like these education efforts, like the one that you just mentioned there, and this like Premier Bitcoin one, is that these are kind of like whether they're nonprofit or private institutions that are kind of like filling in the gap for a population that's just being dropped into Bitcoin, right? It was, in a very short space of time, good or bad, it's not relevant, but there needs to be like support mechanisms, right, for for merchants, training and helping people to understand, how like how they need to adapt to be able to accept Bitcoin, and the available kind of like services and interfaces and wallets or whatever that they have available, and also for the like, I guess if you call them the consumer side, the rest of the population, who may want to do like payments between themselves, or to de-risk. I think that's a quite an important thing that I learned from being here. One taxi driver uh, uh, we were talking to, he's kind of like, yeah, really really worried about this whole Bitcoin thing that's happening, and he's very he feels very safe with the US dollar, and you know uh, 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 it was quite interesting because his concerns was like, would I be able to pay for my children's hospital if there's an emergency the next day? And he said, I don't really have money for savings. This is, he said, you Bitcoiners, actually. He said, you Bitcoiners and you people who are coming into the country, you're quite knowledgeable and you've had like years and stuff to like understand, like what this is and how it works, and like how to navigate, and whatever. But he doesn't know. So I wonder, like, what kind of like support mechanisms do people like him with these kinds of like views have? And the advice is that, like we're not going to convince this guy in a taxi drive for sure. So it was more along the lines of like, it takes time, and you know um you know uh, 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 it takes time, but like, just be open to it. But if still there was more avenues for him to get those questions answered. I know Hello Bitcoin is doing some stuff in the education space as well. I would love to see maybe those videos translated to Spanish or something, because there really needs to be a lot more education efforts on the ground here.
Yeah, agreed, 100%. The article we wrote is actually that, for those of you at the conference, you may have seen it. It's floating around as a printed brochure, and the Spanish version is arriving today. Um, this is the purpose of writing the article, was really to help. There's a lot of interest, as you might have seen, with like Bitcoin Lake and Bitcoin Beach Brazil and different communities trying to replicate or build off of the what Bitcoin Beach has done. And so this article is education from that angle, I think, of people who are trying to help onboard their communities. But for instance, Hello Bitcoin type content, I think, is just an amazing. We need to understand uh, what type of education these folks are looking for, and like maybe where to start, right? And so I'm actually going down to Alzonte tomorrow, and I have a few questions to be asking of people down there, and talking to the Bitcoin Beach team, because I am really curious about learning a little bit more detail about the right way to educate, because I think if we build resources that can be broadly shared, whether that is directly with somebody or with a organizer, right? So like training tools, I guess. I think there's a big opportunity there. The other one that I'm really curious about is to see the um, cold storage sort of education and adoption. I know that Blockstream sent a bunch of Jade wallets down there maybe a month or so ago. And I know that there are people in Bitcoin Beach who are now saving, a significant portion of their income for the first time in their lives. And, I'm really curious to see if the education is happening around self custody.
Yeah, something else I heard, that like in more rural areas, like I think El Zonte would be considered like one of the more rural areas, like compared to like the city, San Salvador. I think what I heard, and sorry, and it is anecdotal, but what I heard is that there's more of a like a use of for Bitcoin there, where there's like more unbanked people, people maybe without identity. Identity cards and whatnot. Whereas in San Salvador here, it's like there's a pretty high card terminal penetration, right? So you could pretty much pay almost anywhere with a Visa card. So it would be quite interesting seeing the comparison to those kinds of more rural areas as well.
And
Right. Do
one thing about,
oh,
sorry, were you going to say, Connor?
no, go ahead, Stephen. I was just going to ask if we want to take questions because we've got just under 15 minutes. So do we want to do some questions for the last little bit, or yeah? I guess if you have if a question comes to mind, I forget how Twitter Spaces works now. You can kind of ask to speak on stage. I guess I think I've just invited Jamie. Yeah, Jamie. What have you got? Any questions or any comments?
Yeah, hi Connor. I'm Salvadorian, living in Canada, and but close to everything that's been going on. And thanks, Andrew, for kind of giving a little bit of context. And I guess that the thing about it is that the education piece is hugely, and that's where a lot of my efforts have been focused from way out here. I have a Bitcoin friend. Her name is Olya, and she went to um, El Salvador just right before the law took place, and she met two young hip hop MCs, freestylers in her journey, and she wanted to tip them in Bitcoin, and they really didn't know how to accept it or use it. And about a few weeks later, she actually contacted me and she said, "Look, they still don't know how to use it. Would you be able to, contact them?" And through WhatsApp and Telegram, we began to share screenshots and they had the Bitcoin Beach wallet and they got to use it pretty good. And I said, "Hey, you guys don't have Twitter profiles. You should get on Twitter profile." On Twitter and get the lightning tipping option from Bitcoin Beach, so that if people like your stuff, they can tip you. And so we began working with them on that, to the point where now we have a couple of investors in their album, in their musical career, and they're going to be performing, I believe, tomorrow in El Sante at the Adopting Bitcoin conference, at the recreation or the I guess the leisure part of the conference, because I think Adopting Bitcoin I think finishes today. And so it's that type of education that it's more kind of one-on-one cater, not really um, at the institutional level, but just at the you know here I'm going to show you level. And I think what Andrew said is just right on. And Andrew, the development of that tipping feature, that link has really helped those guys out, because that's how they're getting funds for their project. And then finally, I think that there's a couple projects in El Salvador. I think my first Bitcoin is another project that they're teaching people to use Moon, I believe, and Strike, and then here in Canada, I'm running a workshop for the diaspora, because that's another key part of it, is that people here don't know how to use it to send money back home. And so on November 30th, I'm in the city where I live here in Canada. I'm going to be running a workshop for all the Salvadorians living here, and Dax Sosa and myself host a space in Spanish every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Salvadorian time, where we have Salvadorians ask anything about Bitcoin and how to use it. And we started that space because we found that a lot of Bitcoin spaces in El Salvador in Spanish were either whether they supported the government on Bitcoin or whether they didn't support government, and nobody was actually teaching anything about it. And so, anyway, just couple of those things, and just to thank Andrew for all the development on the Bitcoin Beach, because it is changing lives. I'll also share Olia's kind of a journey on how she met these guys on the nest as well. So thanks for having this space, guys.
Awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. Go ahead, Andrew.
Oh, I was just going to say, unfortunately, I only picked up about half of that, but thank you. And I just sent you a DM. If you're at the conference, I'd love to chat. And yeah, the tipping, I just wanted to mention the tipping feature. And I will share tip. It's essentially, a new update on, there's basically Bitcoin Beach wallet users have usernames. And there's a web app that they can send people to, basically a web page. And we added the ability for the sender to create the invoice, right? Because we were seeing a lot of people saying, hey, I'm trying to send from Moon, and it doesn't accept amountless invoices. And you may have seen Roman and Shimbera sharing these links out over time, and only some small portion of wallet users could actually support these projects because of the amountless invoice. And so I'll shoot a link to the design Slack just to kind of show you all what that looks like. And it's been great. I went through all the old comments on Twitter of people saying I can't donate, and I said, here, now you can, and just like unlocked a lot more funding for these local projects, because now people with Moon or Blue Wallet or something like this can create the invoice, set the amount, and then support the project.
Very cool stuff. So we've got just over 5 minutes left. Did anyone else want to come up and ask any questions, or if anyone else is here in El Salvador, do you have any other things to share? Let's see if there are any hands.
I've got a couple quick rapid fire things I can share while you scan for people to pull on stage. One thing I've noticed.
All right, yeah, and you can maybe wrap us up actually if no one else has anything to share. So,
well,
closing thoughts from Stephen. Yeah,
just a couple quick rapid fire thoughts about actionable like UX things we can work on. I did a blog post about this. That hiding wallet balances I found is very crucial. A lot of times our kind of default idea of what a wallet app should look like is that you go to the home screen and it tells you how much Bitcoin you have and it shows you all of your most recent transactions and all of that. And I think we should really challenge that assumption because when you're pulling out your wallet all the time and you're spending it every single day, you really don't want to be flashing how much Bitcoin's in your wallet. It's just practical, common. Now that I'm spending Bitcoin, multiple times a day in El Salvador, it just kind of feels like common sense now. Another kind of thing, I think it was Killian Rausch maybe who tweeted this, but a conversation he had with a local Salvadoran who was talking about, like if you accidentally drive into a neighborhood that's controlled with a gang, you might be asked to pay money to leave the neighborhood. It's not something I've had to deal with in the U.S., but that can happen here sometimes. If you're in that situation, you might have to pay whatever you have on you. If that's a $5 bill, you pay that. If that's a $20 bill, you pay that. And so, security features in Bitcoin that allow you to hide your wallet and hide your balance are also important for that. Like maybe you have a pen, like one pen that's like your extortion wallet, and another pen that's your real wallet. I don't know the exact answer to that question, but that's just another kind of local concern to consider. It's not the kind of thing we think about when we're just talking about hodling. And then another kind of concern expressed by someone local is just this idea of like passing it on to your family. And I know there's companies kind of working on this, like at least in the U.S., like Unchained Capital and Casa, and like having a multi-sig wallet and all of that allows you to have keys that get passed down to your family members if you were to suddenly die. But that's an incredibly important thing. We keep talking about, people in El Salvador are now like saving. Some of them are saving for the first times in their lives, but the next step in that is making sure that they're able to effectively pass that down to the next generation. So that, from an education standpoint, I think is probably going to be another important thing, the just kind of inheritance side of that. So those are a couple of concrete UX and educational things that I've been thinking about lately.
Good stuff, man. Yeah, your blog's been super detailed and very interesting. So definitely recommend people read that and give some feedback and share their thoughts on that stuff as well. Let's see here. I don't think anyone else has asked to come up on stage. I don't know if the stage can only hold a certain amount of people. I'm unsure. Not really hosted one of these before.
I think the limit is 10.
Oh, okay, cool.
How do we Twitter?
Hey, Stephen. You know, one of them, I'm really bullish on like BTC Pay Server being like here a bit more. I want to stress. I saw Pav in the audience there. You know, even if there's like one technical person in the family who's able to set up you know, like do the Uncle Jim model for their family and have a multi-sig as well, with each family member owning keys or whatever to move like the main funds. As you were saying, for like that inheritance and passing it down kind of thing. I don't know if that fits into the cultural way that people use money here, but BTC Pay Server can definitely like support that if it does. And let's go BTC. Let's see some more presence there.
All right, very, very cool. All right, well, yeah, let's wrap up then. Got more talks and more experiences to be had here. So yeah, thanks for everyone for joining in and listening in. And if there's any other kind of things you want us to try and document or talk about or share, or you have any questions while we're here, is a good time to try and fire away. So we can bring back some good stuff to wherever we go home, you know. So yeah, let's catch up soon and see you guys later.
Take care. Thanks for having us. Thanks for joining, everyone.
Yeah,
Thanks
catch
all.
you later, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.